Hello, my name is James Taylor.
Hi, it's Maria Franzoni here.
And you're listening to the SpeakersU Podcast. Welcome, Maria. Good to see you. How is it? How is it going? You're always busy. You're always like talking with speakers. And you're giving me updates and everything that's going. I always feel like you've got your finger on the pulse of the speaking business just now.
Well, that's really nice. It's interesting talking about that because I've actually just come back from a dog walk, which was really nice. So although I'm always busy, I always plan time for my dog and to have lunch with my husband every day. So he cooked a lovely lunch, and then we took dogs out for a little walk. Can't do too much now because the Labradoodle's got problems with his legs, but the little one, she's running around all the time, so she's fine. Although I'm working all the time, I always do plan in some time in the day to spend with hubby and doggies.
I love that. I need to do that. I need to take a tip from you. This is one of the tips I'm going to take from you today to schedule a little bit more time with my wife and just a little bit thing. So actually, while I mention my wife, this is what we're not going to be talking about my wife today on this episode. But she is a lawyer. She's an intellectual property lawyer. So I thought today we would talk about speakers' contracts. And I'm going to preface this by, first of all, she's given me a little bit of wording just to say this is purely for entertainment purposes. Neither Maria or I are lawyers, attorneys. That is not our background. We highly encourage you to, if you do need to find a lawyer to help you with this, although Maria has some great resources that she's going to share with you in this course, this episode. So, where should we start on this? Contracts is a big speaker agreements. This is a big, big topic.
It is. We've probably lost most of our listeners already as soon as we've said contracts, but actually, please do not turn off because it's what's really important. And I think speakers don't realize this. Speakers should have their own contract and not necessarily sign the client contract. I would say in an ideal world, you want to be in charge. I'm imagining you have your own contract. In fact, I know you do, James.
Yeah, we have a couple of different versions. We have a in-person one. We have a virtual one because there's obviously a difference there as well. And we actually have a slightly longer version which has a green rider in it, which we can maybe talk about at the same time. But it's actually one of these things. It kind of drives me a little bit insane sometimes because I've just been in Croatia, Clearwater, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, Frankfurt over the past week, and they all had different contracts, and some of these were for different kind of size of organizations, and some of them want their different clauses in it as well. So because we just have a little small team here, I actually find myself probably spending far too much time on contracts than I should be. But maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves. Maybe we should just talk about, like, when we talk about the speakers agreement. First of all, tell me if we were to fast forward to 25 years time, and we're talking about the speaking business. You and I, we still have the SpeakersU podcast somehow. With our digital twin has come in, is now doing it on our behalf. What is unlikely to change in speakers' contracts? Stuff that's been there like 25 years ago that's probably still going to be in a speaker's contract in 25 years' time.
I think all the basics, really. And for me, whenever I talk about contracts with speakers, I always say that the date is the contract. You know, if the date is changing, for me, you need to renegotiate. So the setting the date of the contract, the brief, the scope is always going to be in there. And then your T's and C's are always going to be in there. So I think those three elements aren't ever going to change. And I'm sure we're going to dive deeper into some of the T's and C's. But that scoping piece is really important, that the scope, the brief, what you've agreed is clear in the contract, because it might not change in 25 years' time, but sometimes it can change from the moment of signing, James, to the moment of you turning up at the briefing call. So you do really want to get the scope in there.
It is, and talking about on the AI stuff, I just spoke at I just spoke at a legal conference, but I'm about to go and speak at another one in a few days' time. And what some of the lawyers were saying to partners is the actual agreements are becoming longer now, because so much of it, the AI is actually helping write some of these agreements. So I know one speaker who has like a 2-page agreement. It's like really simple, really clear. Quite small font, 8-point font, but that's his thing. I think my speaker agreement is probably 6 pages. I don't know what's the is there a kind of happy medium on T's and C's about how many we should be looking at here?
Yeah, I think that there are 3 clauses that are absolutely vital, and then the rest you really is entirely up to you if you need them. Do you want to go through those now in terms of what I think are the
Let's
vital
go. Let's
clauses?
go for it.
Should we do it? Should we
So
dive straight in?
let's talk about the vital. If you are thinking about, you've not been using a contract, speaker agreements up to this point, or maybe you just need to refresh what you've got. What are the absolutely essential points that need to be in this agreement?
Okay, so there's three terms and conditions that are essential. But before you even get to that point, what I thoroughly believe and what we did is I think the actual entire detail of the agreement of what you've agreed. So the time to arrive, the time to leave, what you're actually supposed to do while you're there. All those details must be form part of that contract and be signed off so that if that the venue, for example, the audience as well. If any of that changes, then actually the contract is renegotiated. So we actually used to put all of that detail into the contract, because I don't know if it's happened to you before, but we sign a contract that says Venice and then they come back and say, oh, we've moved it to Barcelona. Well, I'm sorry, that can change drastically for the speaker in terms of their ability to get somewhere. So that's a change in contract. So that before you go into the T's and C's, and we can go into more detail and some tips there. But then the three terms and conditions, which again, we can go into detail if you'd like, James, which I always say to speakers, you must have, your payment terms must be agreed and clear and in writing. And connected to your payment terms, your cancellation terms must match your payment terms. Otherwise, you end up having all sorts of problems. And again, we can go into more detail on that. And then the other one is recording an IP. That's really important. If you're recorded, of course, that is your content, and then what happens with that, and what happens with your IP and your intellectual property. So those are the things that are absolutely vital and non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if there's anything else that you put in there. You probably got a ride of your green room.
Yeah. When I don't quite get that quite that fancy. Although when I used to work in the music industry, maybe we'll talk about this. There was some crazy contracts that I had to deal with, and clients both on both sides of the agreements. But one of the ones I often find quite in the way we do it is basically once a client has agreed, either verbally or an email, yes, they want to go ahead. There's two documents that we send out, and one of those documents I just call JT1, and it basically has them fill in a document to get all the information that we need to create the contract and create the invoicing for it and get on their supplier systems if we need to do that as well. Now, this is the thing I'm never sure about doing. I'd love to get your thoughts on it, is the payment schedule bit. So we have traditionally, the way we do it is 50% upon signature of agreement and 50% by the date of the event. So I don't go on the stage until the 100% has been paid for the fee. And now I tend to put that into the agreement. It's not spoken about in advance, but I'm wondering, should this be something that should be discussed in advance, or should I put it into that JT1 form when I'm asking them, just to give them a heads up, this is what we're going to do, so we don't end up creating an agreement and they said, actually, no, we want 45 days after the event before we pay the final payment.
Okay, first of all, I'm going to change your T's and C's straight away. Get the balance 30 days before the event. Some clients even request it. Some bureaus request it 60 days before. So 30 days is not unheard of or unreasonable. And if you're working with a bureau, of course, it's different, because the bureau offers a guarantee to the client and they will always pay you after. Some will agree a deposit, but you know that. So I've never discussed it in advance. It's always gone in that when you send the paperwork. Now, what's interesting, so you have a booking form, or your JT1, and then you have a confirmation form, your JT2. I'm assuming that's your confirmation, yeah?
Yes.
So we got rid of that. We used to have a booking form, and we used to then have a contract. And I'm speaking in the first person. Please do not write in and ask me to represent you. I don't have a bureau anymore. I still think like a booker, so I think I talk in the first person. It confuses a lot of people. I can't help it. So because I have to channel my inner agent when I'm talking about these things. So we got rid of that, and we did what a lot of the American bureaus do, which I absolutely love and I highly recommend. And I have a template if you want one. We went straight to a firm offer form. So rather than a booking form or a contract, it's a firm offer. So the client completes all the details, and because it's a firm offer, the client is committed at the point of signing. The speaker and speaker bureau, if it's through a speaker bureau or speaker direct, is not committed until the speaker receives it and sees that actually, oh, it is still Venice, it hasn't moved to Barcelona, and it is this and it is that, it's everything we talked about. And then the speaker signs it, and now it's committed. And now, at the time of signing, the speaker sends a signed version. They can tidy it up if they want to, and send the first invoice. And actually, we used to send both invoices at the same time so they could go straight into the system. It depends how your tax VAT works. You have to be careful with that if you're UK based. Let's not get into tax. Let's leave that for another exciting installment.
Bring a specialist on that one, I think.
Oh, I think there'll be a lot of questions with regard to tax. So that's how we used to do it. What was the question?
No, but I understand what you're doing there, and actually maybe we should probably talk about. We're talking primarily just now about speaker agreements as if it's with the client. There's another type of, obviously it's if it's with a bureau, and then I'm sure you get into this, like some bureaus act as kind of agent form and some act in a slightly different form as well, and they have maybe different agreements. But let's assume that this is just with an end client, so we're doing direct. There's not a bureau in the middle there. When you're having a little bit of back and forth on the contract, at what point is that happening, and what tend to be the most contentious clauses or the things that often have to get changed?
It is at the point of sending out that firm offer form, or in your case, the JT1, there would be questions. And there may be questions then about the payment terms, oh, we can't get you onto our supplier. And there's ways around that. But that's usually the one, and I won't name names. You've probably worked with some of these clients where they say, oh, we've got a 180-day payment schedule, whatever it's called. So we can't pay you for 6 months. Absolutely no way. We never accepted that. Here's a tip. We can do tips throughout, can we, James, rather than saving them up to the end? Can I give a tip on that one? Yeah. And you'll know this one. More often than not, the sponsor of that event, the head of department or whoever it happens to be, will have a company credit card that will have a significant credit card limit. In fact, my husband was telling me about when he was working in a large organization, and one of the directors had a $10 million credit card limit. So that even your fee is covered in that, James. So they can put it on.
If you're watching this just now, whoever that is, you can book me. I'm happy to. I accept credit cards, Bitcoin, however you'd like to pay.
Fantastic. And it's actually a really good idea to accept credit cards. And some people will be saying, well, hang on a minute, if I'm accepting a credit card payment, then I'm losing that credit card charge. No, you aren't. You add it on top because it's not your fault that the client has a terrible payment schedule. Or process.
Yeah. We have that. So we don't go out to the client initially saying that they can pay by credit card. But if they come back and they said, it's easy if they pay by credit card or pay the deposit by credit card, then we say that's fine. We'll just update the thing. But I think it's a 3% surcharge is what we put on it, which covers American Express. Something that
do nicely.
Just tends to be
if you're old enough.
If you do American Express as well. And the other one that we often which links to this payment schedule, is we also have a late payment clause as well, that they pay a certain percentage over base rate. In our case, because we have different companies, but if we're talking about a UK company that's invoicing for this, then it would be certain percentage over the base rate of the Bank of England. In America, it's going to be whoever it is for you as well, and that usually resolves it. I mean, I don't know. The thing I tend to find is not the thing that takes the longest time is not so much the contract, is getting set up on the supplier's procurement systems. That's the thing that it just feels like it's getting longer and longer and harder to do that stuff now.
It is. Coming back to a couple of things you said. So when you were saying about you don't offer the option up front with the credit card, you can, and we certainly did. We had a Xero as our bookkeeping system. I'm sure all of them can do it. There's you can plug your Stripe, which is what we use for our credit cards, into it. I should be on commission. You can plug it in. Other companies and organizations are available. And actually all they had to do was then press on the link and it automatically added the additional, we had 3% as well, additional 3%. So they could straight away pay. So there wasn't any back and forth, because you want to, of course, reduce all the back and forth. Late payment clause, we never had that, because if they haven't paid, the speaker didn't go, full stop. So what late payment? Never a late payment.
Yeah, Yeah, we had it. I mean, we actually still have, maybe we need to remove it now, because we did have times when the client would say, we're not willing to pay until 30 days after the event. And if it was a certain size of client, a certain type of client, then we might kind of deal with that. But most of the time not. We could probably remove it now because everything is done in advance as well. I'm just looking at some of the other kind of clauses that we have in the contract. Maybe this is an interesting one, because this is the one that I sent to see gets, it moves a little bit. And I'm terrible for saying yes to things, and so I need to have people around me who can say no, because I would just say yes, and that's why I would use people like yourself, or agents, or managers, other people, because you might get booked initially. You have the call with the client, and it's a 60-minute keynote, great, and the contract's done for that, and then you get onto one of the pre-event calls, and they say something like, "Well, actually, we're going to have this panel immediately after your session. Maybe you could join us on the panel, or we're going to have this gala awards dinner the night before. Would you be up for being on that? Or would you be able to meet with some of our sponsors immediately after the event?" And that starts to have mission creep, and so I'm guessing you've seen this a lot, and I'd love to know how you deal with this. So we're going to assume that the contract is already signed. They've already signed the contract, and now they're making requests.
Very easy on the briefing call. I mean, the way we used to do it is because I would be on the briefing call with the speaker. So if I was on the briefing call with you, I'd say, actually, James, bear with us a moment. We need to check and see if that is on the contract. If it's not already in the contract and agreed as part of the brief, we might need to renegotiate. And simple as that. And the clients go, "Oh, okay, that's fine." And then you can step away. So let's revisit that. If James's diary allows and we can make it work and it doesn't require anything else, let's see what we can do. But you've then got an out to be able to say no. Personally, I think if you're at an event and you are able to stay and it's not costing you any more in terms of preparation, but it's allowing you to network, and I know you're going to agree with this, I would stay, because you want to build a strong relationship with that client and do a bit more, but not if it has an effect on the cost of the flight, if you've got to change it, or other knock-on effects. So it is a balancing act. And it's interesting, we're talking contracts and talking money, and my left hand is itching. In Italy, when your left hand itches, it means money's coming in. So I think I might be having some money coming in, which is really great.
Oh, good. I learned about it. It's another one of those Italian signs. It's like with that one, and there's that one. Is that I've learned a new one.
If it's the right hand, it's money going out. We never want that hand to itch. We like an itchy left hand.
See, who said this show isn't informational, educational? Before we're gonna talk about some kind of more detailed things in just a moment. We're talking about things like green riders, IP rights, security for certain types of speakers as well. And I think we're going to maybe spill some secrets, but some funny stories we've seen over the years on contracts. But before we do that, a quick word from our sponsors.
If you're a speaker who wants to get more bookings, charge higher fees, and run a thriving speaking business, then you need to know Maria Franzoni. Maria has spent over 2 decades inside the world's top speaker bureaus, negotiating thousands of engagements for some of the biggest names on stage. Today, she works one-to-one with speakers, helping them build the business behind their speaking. If you'd like to be more bookable and more profitable, visit mariafranzoni.me to find out how she can help you.
Do you dream of stepping on stage and being paid big? $10,000, $50,000, or even more? For just one keynote? If you're ready to stop speaking for free or low fees and build a speaking business that generates real income, listen closely. Introducing the 7-Figure Speaker Program with James Taylor. He's trained hundreds of speakers to go from small stages to commanding big fees, teaching you the full system: marketing, sales, craft, profitability. You'll get insider templates, email swipe copy, checklists, everything you need to book more gigs, raise your rates, win speaker bureau deals, and build evergreen revenue streams. If you want the strategy and tactics to build a global speaking business faster than you thought possible, this is your moment. Go to SpeakersU.com and get started today. The stage is ready for you.
Okay, welcome back. So let's talk about some things we often see. This is kind of getting into a lot more detail. the IP rights side, whether you're being asked to be filmed, this is going to be filmed. The client is maybe saying, we'd like to make this available put it on YouTube or internally in their website, their training. How do you tend to talk about that in a contract or negotiate it?
So there should certainly be something in your contract about recording and about IP. The stance we always took in the contract was that the client is not allowed to record or even back project, so do projection onto a screen without written permission. And in that written permission, they have to explain how they're going to use it and what they're going to do with it. Because a lot of the times, so I worked with Paul McKenna a lot, and he insisted on being recorded because he didn't want somebody suing him for turning them into a turkey at weekends or like a howling cat or something, when then you look at the video and it's clear he hasn't done that. So he would insist on being recorded so he wasn't sued. It was quite funny, actually.
I do the same thing as well. I record all of them, and I can maybe talk about why I do this as well. But I record either if I can't get one of my own little cameras just sitting at the front to record it, I'll just like record the audio on my phone, just so I have that backup. Even if they're doing it like a fantastic video recording and everything's being done there as well, is just really good for you to have a recording of what was said on stage and the timing. And also it means you can go back and you clip that footage and improve your presentation or your keynote over time as well. What about a common one that they say is, we want to be able to use this footage to put on YouTube publicly on YouTube or internally on an internal website, training website, for example?
Yeah, it's really difficult. You've got to really understand how long it's going to be there and whether you want to do that. Most speakers aren't going to want to have their videos publicly on YouTube, especially if their speech is not tailored every single time, that it's not a different speech every time. You're not going to want that because anybody can watch it. I don't think it'll stop people booking you, but it could stop maybe some surprise and some content. So you don't want it on YouTube, ideally. So the way we would get around it if somebody wanted to do something of that nature is we would say, look, you can't do that. If there was a legitimate reason that they wanted to do something of that nature, we say, why don't you, after the speech, instead do a quick 10-minute Q&A with the speaker and have that Q&A on your YouTube channel so that you're able to have something. But then you're not giving away all the speech. Internally, you want to know why you're using it internally, how many people are going to see it. You might want to renegotiate. Because, if you're speaking to 200 people, but now it's going on the intranet and 40,000 people are going to see it, there might be a fee increase required there, or there might be a licensing agreement. And maybe you want to host it rather than they host it. So this goes sort of into, you can go really deep into this here, but you need to control your video. And I would never, ever, as a speaker, authorize use of my video until I've seen how that's been edited. I want to know that the lighting, the quality of the vocals, the sound is good, that it hasn't been misedited, not misrepresenting me, but also it's high enough quality, because that's you, it's your brand. You've got to protect that. I saw you making a note there. You've obviously had an experience.
No, I'm just, as we're speaking, I'm actually just looking, I've got a speaker's agreement here for one I'm doing on Friday. And I'm actually just looking through it, and I'm just reminded, because you're talking about we're talking about different things here as well. We're talking about the right to record, but we're also talking about editorial rights as well. So
yes,
I'm just looking here. I have here generally, I am allowed to record in all circumstances for my own uses. I can then use any of that publicly, as long as I get approvals from the client after the event. And it's usually fine. Obviously, there's certain things, maybe if you're signing NDAs or other things as well, but I'm always usually getting the client's permission before I use any of my own recordings publicly as well. But I tend not to put the whole thing up. It may be a little short. It tends to be, I use the Q&As sometimes because it tends to be very specific, as long as it's not naming the company or the client, but I always get permission from that. The other thing I do say is, the client will ensure that no unauthorized recording will be done as well from their side. So this is more bigger public events as well. The client may record the speaker's presentation for internal use only, but any external uses, additional uses, that has to be negotiated under separate agreement, unless it's negotiated already in advance. and also recordings of those will be the actual raw recording will be given to the speaker at the same time, so I can then use it for promotional footage as well. When we do have clients say yes, we would like to use certain things for public consumption, the clauses that we tend to put in it are no more than, I think it's 5 short video clips of no more than 1 minute in length, and the speaker gets authorization to approve those as well, and those can be used
Absolutely.
publicly. I tend to be fine with. So these are just, but I guess it's all this stuff is kind of open to negotiation, really, based upon who the client is and what the event is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you made the point that, sometimes these negotiations can go on, and also with regards to procurement and getting paid and getting set up as a supplier. To cut, to cut all that out, you could say to a client, do you currently work with a speaker bureau that you have a good relationship with? Would you like to put the contract through them? They're already on your supplier list. You already understand their contract. And then now you're negotiating with the bureau rather than with the end client. And the bureau has your best interests at heart in terms of protecting you and your IP, because they want to be able to book you again and again and again. They don't want you to have your material out there for free. So you could always do that as well if you're a bit inexperienced, as long as, in terms of negotiating, as long as it's a bureau that then is going to want to represent you afterwards. It's a great way of getting actually onto their roster too.
And I'm going to give a name check here to Vin Jiang, a really great speaker on communication skills. And in his contract, I seem to remember he actually has that the client pays for a videographer to come with him on the trip, including a hotel room as well. All of his stuff is filmed and the client is able to use that. So it's almost like getting a videographer coming like behind the scenes, creating a behind the scenes content for the conference. And some clients really like that. For Vin, it's great because it means that he's getting all this content all the time. And it looks really, if you've ever seen any of his TikTok stuff, it's like, how do they do that? Like, they've got the perfect shot and it's all very premeditated. It's all really kind of thought about. So, tip Vin, great stuff. Travel. What about this? This is the one that we often see kind of has kind of little tweaks around the sides, where maybe the client says we're going to pay and arrange your flights, your hotels. Other ones are going to do travel buyouts. Other ones that they will pay, but you have to arrange. Other ones that it's an all-in fee. Where does that tend to go in the contracts?
Yeah, so it's one of the T's and C's, of course. So we used to have 2 options only, just to keep life simple. And option 1 is the client arranges and pays for everything. And option 2, the client gives you a buyout, so that they give you the money and you spend it as you will. Obviously, a reasonable buyout for you to then arrange it. And with the buyout would get you. So, say for example, let's go back to Venice again. I don't know why I've got that on my mind, but the buyout would get you from. It's a good place, not a bad place. It would get you from wherever you're traveling from to Venice Airport. Then they would send a car and pick you up. It wouldn't buy you out to get you all the way to the hotel. And then they would look after you when you land in their country, on their territory. And that's really so you don't have to worry about language and currency and all of those kind of things, so that you're looked after. You do want to have a little bit of VIP perks as the speaker, really.
Yeah, I know some speakers, especially in America, they will do an all-in fee because it's kind of easy if you're in America and you're only primarily speaking in America to work out costs, and you can build that into your fee. That's kind of straightforward. I think for someone like myself, it's more challenging because it's all international. I mean, I'm never speaking in my own country, and it's if you're booking a flight you have a trip to Australia to do an event, that's quite a hefty price for that ticket as well. But I would say some of my speakers who do a lot of international travel, they still decide to ask the client to do a travel buyout. So they have a certain ranges that the client pays for. And for them, that's partly because they want the flexibility that they if they book a last minute event in a certain region, they don't have to go back to that client and say, I need to change my flight. Also, some of those that have partners, they might want to say, actually, I'm going to bring my husband, wife, cat, significant other with me on this trip as well. And actually, I'm going to book, instead of booking a business class ticket, I'm going to book 2 economies or 2 premium economy tickets as well. So these are the little kind of things that you can kind of do as well, which brings me to a newer rider that we're starting to see now in contracts for speakers comes from the music world and the acting world. They've been doing this for a long while. Equity in the UK have been drivers for this in the acting world, which is the green rider. So is this something you've come across with some of the speakers you've dealt with?
Not many of them, usually the sustainability speakers as opposed to anybody else, and the odd futurist. I'm not saying that they're odd, but one or two futurists have done it too. But actually, it's probably become more common since I've stopped booking speakers, I would imagine, because of course I haven't booked speakers since 2021. So I suspect it has become more common.
Yeah. So we have a green rider. There's a program I do myself and Alison Burns called the Ethical Futurist, where we're talking about sustainability, and it feels very appropriate to have a green rider for something like that. And so the green rider it could have anything just as simple as if there's an airport pickup taking you to the venue, that it's an EV car. Or let's say if the event is within a certain radius, that they would book train travel instead of air travel. That's another one you sometimes find. You can push, and this is once again, it's all of negotiation. And if you're like if you're a 100K speaker talking on sustainability, I don't know if it's 100K speakers talking on sustainability. I'm not sure. If you're Greta Thunberg, let's say, then there's probably other clauses that you can put in green riders. For example, that any food waste that will be given to local causes. I mean, it's really, you get quite creative. I know we're going to come on to an episode in the future talking about ego, and there's a little bit, I think you just have to be quite cognizant of who the client is, where in the world the client is, the industry that client is in as well. If you're doing I won't say the industry for the client, but a very traditional industry. Well, I knew if I put in a green rider, it would have caused some major pain for that. So you have to think about it, and then you go and do other events. And actually, this is surprising, like oil and gas, energy events. I've done green riders with them, and actually they're very on this stuff because they're having to think about this stuff all the time. So it could be a little bit of a change, but maybe if someone just now that's watching this or listening to this episode, if you have a green rider or you think something is important to put, what would that be? Love to see that in the comments as well. Maybe talk about one kind of final one here that we sometimes hear about, which is it doesn't really affect me so much, but you've dealt with some very high profile speakers, politicians, celebrities, and it's the security clauses within your contracts. So talk to me about those security clauses. What do some of those look like?
Oh yeah, and they can absolutely derail actually an entire event. So with certain individuals, usually former heads of state are the ones that have a lot of security. And you're booking that former head of state, and you've got a hefty fee. And then you discover that there are 8 people traveling with that head of state. And I'm not exaggerating, and I can tell you who it is later, that particular example. But there will be often security people, assistants, support people, all sorts of people. And you've now got to accommodate them. And 1 or 2 might go in economy, but most of them expect to be in business class. Or if he's traveling, it happened to be a him, could be a her, could be a they, traveling in first class, at least one will expect to travel side by side. And we've also had situations where private planes have been required, of course. So then everybody's in the private. And then you've got to accommodate them and feed them and think about all of that. But I imagine you must have had that with some of your bands where they've got a bit of an entourage that go with them, all of the people supporting them.
Yeah, we did corporate stuff. I remember there's one artist I represented from a previous life, and we would have 40 people on the road to go and do one corporate event. And so you got to feed all those people. You got to get them there. There's certain things. They've got nannies. Some of them, not the artists themselves, but their children have nannies because they're bringing certain kind of. So you're kind of having to think about that, and all those costs start to ramp up. I know a friend of mine he's a fixer for celebrities, let's say for corporate events that want more celebrities, like so if they want Leonardo DiCaprio, for example, and some of those security clauses I've seen crazy. But probably people that are watching this, that we're not in that That's not our thing. The only one I would say is, and this is just sometimes as just a regular speaker like myself, you will go and speak in countries or capitals of cities where there's a higher risk in those places to go and speak there. So this is what I tend to do. This is more for the travel side. Is I will ask the client. This doesn't have to be in the contract, but I will ask the client to have the person that's waiting for me at the airport to have a name, not my own name, on that board. And in advance of the event, I want the client to send me the name of the driver, obviously the mobile phone number of the driver, and the license plate of their car as well. And that is because there's some places you go to, you're jet lagged, it's 2 a.m, you've just arrived at an airport, and there will be people that will take advantage of you being a little bit jet lagged and saying, oh yes, I'm going. And so there's certain security precautions you could take. I know some female speakers who they have some other things that they often think about going into a place for the new time. And I'm not talking about maybe the places that you see on TV, the kind of war zones or former war zones here. I'm actually talking about cities in major countries that can be some of the most challenging from a safety and a security standpoint. But the thing I was always told, the most dangerous part of any journey is the drive that you drive from your home to the airport, and that is usually the case. So just not to get anyone too worried, but you can ask for some of these things if it's suitable as well.
Really good advice. Very good advice.
Let's talk about some funny ones. What are some of the craziest ones that you've seen? We're not going to name any names here. Maybe you could tell me afterwards, though. But what are some really crazy clauses that you've seen in contracts?
We see. I don't think they're that crazy when you understand them. So I've had clauses where the speaker doesn't want to be photographed upwards. It's not a good angle. Looking up. Which actually I don't think that's unreasonable, quite frankly. So they've been quite. We've had no. So this is not unreasonable either. No camera flashes at all while speaking. I don't think that's unreasonable. No eating and drinking while speaking. I don't think that's unreasonable. Now here's one which I've had with my favourite speaker, and it's because he had a love-hate relationship with these people, and that was no journalists allowed in the audience. And I'll tell you who that is later. No journalists allowed in the audience. And we've also had no politicians allowed in the audience. I'd love to have that in my rider or something. Isn't that wonderful? That's a good one, isn't it? You're thinking I'm going to add that one in. No competitive speakers was another one. That's quite. I don't think it's funny. I think it's interesting. No speakers who. Well, then you've got to define what's competitive. Yeah. What do you mean by competitive? I mean, any speaker could be a competitor potentially, but someone speaking on a similar topic, I don't want them listening into my speech. Wow. Right. Wow. No late arrivals, not allowed in. And if you go out to the toilet, you're not allowed back in. It's like, so I don't think they're particularly odd. I think there's probably odder ones. I have on occasion, and you've done this a lot more, worked with celebrities, and I was going to say musicians because you've done that a lot more, but celebrities and musicians tend to have the more interesting ones, or slightly out there ones. Like, I had one who wanted a masseuse before he went on stage to relax him, and it was generally a masseuse.
Only one. Only one individual, yeah. And I actually worked with an artist who insisted on two masseuses.
Only one masseuse. I thought only one individual asked. I have had, now this was one that we turned down. A particular individual, again celebrity, wanted one of the staff client people to go out and get him some drugs, which obviously you're not going to do. And he also wanted some company of a certain type. So those weren't in the riders, but those are things that people have been asked for, which I think is completely inappropriate. And I did have one situation where I accompanied a speaker, and again, it's not in the rider, but she insisted on having a 250, what is it called? Is it centiliter? Big glass of white wine, which she necked before she then went on stage. I wouldn't have given it to her. The client person did. And I wouldn't have minded, but it was 10 o'clock in the morning. It wasn't an after dinner. Wow. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. I've never forgotten And the thing is, these things, you get tripped up eventually.
Yeah,
It's not good.
I,
Never
I'm
works
so
for again.
low, I'm so low maintenance now. Having heard all these stories as well,
You
I
are.
do actually have an espresso 20 minutes before I go on stage because it just gives me that little bit of a just before you go. It takes about 20 minutes to kick in for me. Um, the drugs one is interesting. I remember years ago when I was in the music industry, there was a guy who was famously the advancer for Elton John, and he would arrive into a place in advance. And this is all public knowledge that I think Elton's probably put this in his book just now as well. So I'm not going to get sued here, but he would go a day in advance to that city to procure things. And it was always, I remember, because you always have an accountant on the tour, and the accountant, it was always put in as flowers. So you'd spend like $500,000 on flowers every year for this particular artist. But other actually ones that do make sense, and I think this is, the art. Some clients will kind of look at some of these things and say completely crazy. There is a little bit, like all of these things, there is a little bit sometimes where there's a reason that does make sense behind it. So if you think about a speaker, like myself, even for myself, I mean, I'm on the road the majority of the year. I'm doing 250,000 miles, a year, and traveling. And a lot of musicians are exactly the same. Top executive, you're a CEO, you're doing the same as well. So there are certain things that do make sense. One of them, I remember getting a contract in for an artist, and it had a full size. This hotel had to have access to a full size swimming pool in it, and I was like, "What? Full size swimming pool?" And this was a few years ago, and actually it turned out this particular person, he'd been addicted to drugs, heroin or something many years ago. And that was he needed to have some physical thing that he would do every day because he had this, it was like getting something out of his system, really. So like, actually, okay, if that allows you to perform at that top level, you get weird ones. I remember one was in the Rider, the dressing room had to have an oil can, a giant oil drum painted red. And the thinking of the artist was that if they would do that, then they're probably going to get the sandwiches right, which is, I understand. And my hero when it comes to these types of things, it was Tony Bennett. And Tony Bennett was just some water, I think some tea, and some fresh towels. That was it. And so that is my gold standard for writers. So if I want to be as simple and as easy to work with as someone like Tony Bennett, if he was able to do it until the age of 90, whenever he was, and doing all those concerts all around the world, and I think that's probably good enough for me.
Love Tony Bennett. Love him. Fantastic. Brilliant. I think we've probably exhausted everyone now. If anyone stayed with us, if you're still with us, well done.
Now, in terms of tools and tips, I know you have something maybe you can share with folks that are, they're thinking, oh, I don't have a speaker's agreement. I don't know what do I do? I think you have something you can share with folks or a resource for them.
I do have a template, a contract template, and you'll discover when you get it, it's actually a firm offer form template, but I call it a contract template because most people won't know. But I also want to share a little tip for you as well with regards to contracts. And here's something we learnt the hard way very early on. When you're putting the date of the event in your contract, be very careful because, of course, if you're writing 1/9/2025. Here in the UK, it's the 1st of September. In the US, it's the 9th of January. Be very careful that. But what I would also add is always put the day of the week, because you'll discover that if you put the day of the week as well as the date, somebody's going to come back and say, no, we meant the Wednesday, not the Thursday. And that's come up many times because you would not believe how often people make mistakes with the date of their event.
That's great. I love that idea. I'm going to do that. That's a new one. I've learned, if I've learned nothing else from this episode, I'm going to do that. I'm going to add the day of the week.
Is that it? Well. That's all you've learned. That's it.
That's it. That's what I've learned. So I'm going to say, we're talking about contract, and it can sometimes get a bit overwhelming thinking about contracts. But I actually know one speaker very well who doesn't do contracts, and he's been speaking in this business for many, many years, and he just doesn't do contracts. He does email, so you can argue that the email is a confirmation. He said, my word is my bond. I just don't do contracts. And it's got him in trouble sometimes because things have got cancelled last minute, and then but that's just the way that he likes to live. He likes, kind of more simply. So you don't have to do this. I would probably, Maria and I would both argue you should have a contract. And if you are, in the past, I used things like Hello Sign or Echo Sign to do contracts, to send them to clients so they could sign digitally. If you use Google Docs now, they have a new feature that they've just added like a month ago, which allows you to do e-signatures within the Google Docs. So you don't even have to pay for any of this fancy e-signature software. You get it within Google Docs if you use Google Docs now as well. So I think we'll probably talk this topic to death. I think if anyone's got any additional questions around, if you want us to do maybe a future episode on something maybe more specific related to contracts or agreements, or we didn't even talk about bureau agreements, which are a little bit different as well, make sure to reach out to email hello@speakersu.com. That's hello@speakersu.com. Or maybe you have an idea for another episode, perhaps that we should be doing in the future. So from me, James Taylor, thanks for watching.
And from me, Maria Franzoni, I have an idea for another episode, James. Goodbye from me too.
Why do some speakers get booked again and again while others struggle to secure even one paid engagement? In the bookability formula, Maria Franzoni, former International Speaker Bureau owner, reveals what the top 1% most booked speakers do differently. She analyzed years of bureau data and discovered that just 1% of her roster generated 80% of the bookings. In this book, Maria shares the clear, proven framework any speaker can use to become commercially and consistently bookable. Get your copy now at mariafranzoni.me or alternatively on Amazon.